It didn't come with an announcement, no press release, no royal balcony moment. Just a quiet signature by Charles III, and suddenly, everything shifted. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped out days later, something felt different, more authority, more weight, and insiders began whispering one dangerous question. Had she just been given power no Queen Consort had ever held? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made this moment so unsettling was not what was said, but what was carefully left unsaid. Reports suggest the signing took place inside a restricted royal office, a place usually reserved for matters of extreme constitutional sensitivity. No public acknowledgement followed, which in itself raised alarm bells among those familiar with palace protocol. Because in the monarchy, silence is rarely accidental, it is strategic. And this silence felt deliberate, almost protective, as if something too significant had just been set into motion behind closed doors. Those who observed Catherine in the days that followed began noticing subtle but unmistakable changes. Her posture carried a different kind of certainty. Her presence, once measured and graceful, now held an undercurrent of quiet command. It was not dramatic, it was not overt. But it was there, and those trained to read the language of royal behavior could not ignore it. Senior aides, according to various whispers, were caught off guard. Some reportedly learned of the development only after the fact, a break from the tightly controlled communication chain that usually defines royal operations. That alone suggested urgency, or perhaps something even more calculated. Early murmurs of a new authority structure began circulating in the background, never confirmed, never denied, but persistent enough to gain traction. And as those murmurs grew louder, comparisons to past limitations placed on Queen Consorts began to surface, highlighting just how unprecedented this moment could be. Because traditionally, that role has always existed within clearly defined boundaries, ceremonial, supportive, carefully contained. But this felt different. This felt like a shift not just in role but in power itself. And the deeper insiders looked, the more one unsettling truth began to emerge. This was not an isolated decision. It was connected to something older, something buried, something that had been waiting for the right moment to be used. But the chilling truth wasn't just about Charlotte's health, it was tied to a royal legacy that had long been buried, until now. For decades, it sat buried in royal archives, untouched, unspoken, almost forgotten. A clause so rarely invoked that even seasoned palace insiders barely understood its reach. Yet now, sources suggest it may have been activated not for a king, but for Catherine, Princess of Wales. The very idea felt almost impossible at first, like a rumor. That should collapse under its own weight. But the deeper the whispers spread, the more they began to align with something far more unsettling, a pattern. Because this was not just any clause. Reports suggest its origins trace back to moments in royal history, when stability itself was under threat, when the monarchy faced pressures so intense that extraordinary measures had to be quietly written into its foundation. It was never meant for ordinary times. It was designed for fractures, for transitions, for moments when the crown needed to protect itself from forces both inside and outside its own walls. And that is exactly why its sudden relevance now feels so explosive. Those familiar with historic royal governance have begun revisiting long-forgotten documents, searching for traces of this hidden mechanism. Some interpretations suggest it was created to temporarily redistribute authority under extreme conditions, allowing influence to shift without triggering public disruption. Others don't claim it was intentionally left vague, a legal shadow that could be shaped depending on the crisis at hand. But one detail keeps surfacing again and again: it was considered far too powerful to ever be used lightly. In fact, insiders whisper that previous generations deliberately avoided invoking it, fearing the ripple effects it could unleash across the delicate hierarchy of the royal family. Because once activated, it does not simply adjust roles, it redefines them. That is where the tension begins to build, because if this clause truly has been brought into play, then it challenges everything people thought they understood about the limits placed on a queen consort. Traditionally, that role has always been carefully contained, its influence guided by protocol, its authority shaped by tradition. But this clause, if the speculation holds, does not follow those same rules. It exists outside the expected framework, almost as if it was designed to override it entirely when necessary. And that possibility alone has sparked quiet concern among those who understand just how fragile the balance of power within the monarchy can be. Because when boundaries shift, even slightly, the consequences rarely remain contained. Legal experts, according to various reports, have begun examining the implications behind closed doors, not publicly, not officially, but enough to suggest that something significant is being taken seriously at the highest levels. And while no one is willing to confirm anything outright, the language being used words like unprecedented, extraordinary, historically sensitive only adds to the growing sense that this is not just speculation anymore. It is something real, something unfolding in real time, even if the full picture remains just out of reach. The timing, too, feels impossible to ignore. With the monarchy navigating one of its most uncertain periods in recent memory, the pressure to secure stability has never been greater. And in moments like this, history has shown that the institution does not hesitate to protect itself, even if it means reaching into its most guarded secrets. And that is what makes this moment so dangerous. Because if the clause was truly activated for Catherine, then it is not just about elevating her role, it is about shifting the entire structure around her. It suggests a level of trust, of necessity, that goes far beyond tradition. And it raises a question that no one inside the palace seems ready to answer out loud. Because power, once redistributed, does not simply settle quietly. It creates tension. It exposes fault lines. It forces reactions. And somewhere within those reactions lies the real story, the one that has yet to fully surface. And if this clause truly was activated, it raises an even more explosive question: why now? And who stands to lose the most from it? It was a closed-door meeting, no cameras, no leaks, no official notes. But something happened inside that room that insiders now describe as decisive. When Catherine, Princess of Wales, walked out, those watching closely noticed it instantly. The hesitation was gone. The shift was subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. But to those who understand the quiet language of the palace, it was unmistakable. This was not the same presence that had entered that room. Reports suggest the meeting brought together Charles III, William, Prince of Wales, and a select group of senior advisors, individuals who are only called upon when the stakes are no longer ordinary. And that alone raised the tension, because such gatherings are not routine. They are reserved for moments when the future itself is being weighed. What unfolded behind those closed doors has never been confirmed, but insiders whisper of intense discussions, the kind that stretch beyond protocol and into the realm of necessity. Conversations reportedly centered around leadership stability, around the weight of what lies ahead, and the growing need for certainty in uncertain times. The tone, according to those familiar with the aftermath, shifted midway through, becoming more structured, more deliberate, almost ceremonial in nature. And that detail matters. Because ceremony, within the monarchy, is not just tradition. It is a signal, a marker that something is being formalized, recognized, or quietly enacted without public declaration. It suggests that what happened inside that room may not have been a discussion at all, but a turning point. At the center of it all was Catherine. Reports indicate that she was not merely present, she was addressed, directly, differently, as if her role until that moment had been something temporary, something evolving, but now it was being defined. There is a difference between participation and authority, and those who observed her afterwards sensed that line had just been crossed. The way she carried herself, the way conversations around her subtly adjusted, at all pointed toward a shift could not easily be undone. And standing close to that shift was William. Observers noted a change in him as well, a heightened sense of protectiveness, as if he understood the weight that had just been placed on her shoulders. Not just support, but alignment, as though whatever had been decided inside that room was not only accepted, it was being defended. Then came the quieter changes, the ones that rarely make headlines but speak louder than any announcement. Palace staff, according to various interpretations, were instructed to adjust protocols, not dramatically, not in ways that would attract attention, but enough to signal that internal operations were beginning to realign. Small shifts in access, subtle changes in deference, a different order in how decisions were being filtered and communicated. And those who noticed these details understood something critical. This was not symbolic. It was functional. Something had been set into motion that required the system itself to adapt. And that is where the unease begins to grow. Because when the internal machinery of the monarchy starts to shift, it rarely stops at one change. It creates ripples, and those ripples travel fast, touching every corner of the royal household, whether acknowledged or not. What began as a single meeting, held in silence, was now beginning to echo through the structure itself. And as those echoes grew stronger, they started revealing something far more unsettling than the meeting alone. Because the real shock wasn't the meeting itself, it was how quickly the ripple effects began to surface across the royal household. Within days, subtle changes began appearing, small at first, almost unnoticeable. But to those inside the palace system, they signaled something massive. Authority lines were shifting, and not everyone was prepared. It started in ways that could easily be dismissed by an outsider: a pause before a response, a slight adjustment in who spoke first, a quiet deference that seemed to redirect itself toward Catherine, Princess of Wales. But inside an institution where every gesture carries weight, these were not coincidences. They were signals. Reports suggest that Catherine's influence in internal decisions began expanding almost immediately, not in loud declarations, but in subtle recalibrations of how discussions were being shaped. Conversations that once moved through established channels were now, according to various whispers, beginning to pass through her presence in a more direct way. And that shift, however controlled, was enough to unsettle the delicate balance that had long defined the royal structure. Senior figures, those accustomed to a fixed hierarchy, reportedly began adjusting carefully, cautiously, but noticeably. Some leaned into the change, aligning themselves with what appeared to be a new center of gravity. Others hesitated, uncertain whether this transformation was temporary or something far more permanent. And in that hesitation, tension began to grow. Because in the monarchy, clarity is everything. Roles are defined, expectations are understood, and deviations, no matter how small, create space for uncertainty. That uncertainty now lingered in the background, unspoken but deeply felt. Even more telling was the silence from key palace figures. No confirmations, no denials, just a calculated absence of commentary that only intensified the speculation. Because when those at the highest levels choose not to speak, it is rarely because there is nothing to say, it is because what could be said carries too much weight. Behind the scenes, according to insiders, the atmosphere began to shift. Conversations became more guarded, decisions more deliberate. The ease that once defined certain interactions was replaced with something sharper, something more cautious. It was not chaos, it was control, but control under pressure. And history has shown that moments like this rarely remain contained. Comparisons to past royal power, struggles began surfacing quietly, drawing parallels between this unfolding situation and earlier periods when authority within the monarchy had been tested, reshaped, even challenged from within. Those who remembered those moments understood what often follows: resistance. Not always open, not always visible, but present, always present. And sure enough, early signs of that resistance began to emerge. Not in direct confrontation, but in subtle pushback, delayed responses, alternative suggestions, quiet attempts to maintain old structures in the face of new realities. It was measured, careful, but it was there. Because power, especially when it shifts unexpectedly, does not settle easily. It disrupts. It forces adaptation. And for some, adaptation is not acceptance, it is strategy. The deeper this transformation moved through the palace, the clearer it became that not everyone was willing to embrace it fully. Some were watching, waiting, calculating what this change truly meant for their place within the system. And that is where the tension begins to tighten, because when influence grows in one direction, it inevitably pulls it away from another. The structure does not expand, it redistributes, which means someone, somewhere, feels the loss. And as these subtle shifts became harder to ignore, attention slowly began to turn toward one figure whose position, once firmly defined, now seemed to exist in a quieter, more uncertain space. A space that raised questions no one was openly asking, but many were beginning to consider. And as these shifts became harder to ignore, attention turned to one figure whose position may have been quietly undermined. It wasn't announced, but it was felt. a subtle but undeniable shift in hierarchy. For the first time, insiders began questioning whether the traditional limits of a queen consort had just been erased. The change did not arrive with ceremony or spectacle. It moved quietly, almost invisibly, through the structure itself. Yet those closest to the system recognized it immediately. Because influence inside the monarchy is not always declared, it is observed, sensed, and understood through patterns that rarely make it to the surface. And what they were beginning to observe around Catherine, Princess of Wales, no longer fit within the boundaries that had defined her role until now. Reports suggest her presence in internal matters was expanding beyond the ceremonial, reaching into spaces that had traditionally remained out of reach, not forcefully, not disruptively, but steadily. And that steady expansion is what made it so powerful. There is a difference between being seen and being relied upon. For years, Catherine had been positioned as a figure of stability, a symbol of continuity, someone who supported the institution with quiet consistency. But now, according to various interpretations, that support appeared to be evolving into something more central. Conversations that once circled around established figures were beginning to include her more directly, sometimes even pivoting through her perspective before moving forward. And that kind of shift, however subtle, carries weight. Because within a system built on tradition, even the smallest realignment of influence can signal a much deeper transformation. This is where the tension begins to intensify, because reports have started suggesting an overlap and unusual crossing of lines between roles that were once clearly separated. Responsibilities that had traditionally belonged elsewhere now appeared to be intersecting with Catherine's growing presence. Not officially, not openly, but enough to raise questions among those paying close attention. And those questions have only fueled speculation about a broader internal realignment, one that may be unfolding quietly but with significant implications. Some insiders view this as a necessary evolution, a strategic adaptation to the pressures facing the monarchy today. Others, however, remain cautious, or even uneasy, interpreting these developments as a break from precedent that could have unpredictable consequences. That divide is becoming harder to ignore, because when those within the palace begin interpreting the same shift in different ways, it reveals something deeper: a lack of clarity about what is actually happening. And in an institution where clarity has always been a source of strength, that uncertainty carries its own kind of weight. Historical precedent offers little guidance here. There are few, if any, moments that mirror what is now being suggested. The role of a queen consort has always existed within defined limits, shaped by tradition and reinforced over generations. To see those limits potentially expanding or even dissolving places this moment in uncharted territory. And yet, the most compelling evidence is not found in documents or statements. It is found in the way these changes are being reflected outwardly, in subtle but consistent ways. Public appearances, and according to observers, have begun to reinforce this evolving dynamic. The tone, the interactions, the positioning all hint at a role that is no longer confined to its previous definition. It is not overt, it is not declared, but it is there, quietly reshaping perception with every passing moment. And perception within the monarchy often becomes reality long before anything is confirmed. Which is why this shift feels so significant. Because if Catherine's role has indeed moved beyond its traditional limits, then what we are witnessing is not just a personal elevation, it is a structural change, a recalibration of how power is distributed, understood, and exercised within the royal framework. And that kind of change does not happen in isolation. It affects everything around it. It forces adaptation. It creates pressure. It demands response. And as this transformation continues to unfold, one truth is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. This is no longer just about Catherine. It is about the institution itself. But if Catherine's role has truly evolved, then the bigger story isn't just about her rise, it's about what this means for the future of the monarchy itself. This may not be about the present at all. According to some insiders, what we're witnessing is a long-term strategy, one designed to secure the future before it's too late. And that possibility reframes everything. Because if this is not a reaction to the moment, but a preparation for what comes next, then the quiet shifts surrounding Catherine, Princess of Wales, begin to take on a very different meaning. They stop looking like isolated decisions and start revealing themselves as part of a much larger design, one focused not on today's balance of power, but on tomorrow's stability. Reports suggest that the focus within the monarchy has been gradually moving toward the next reign, toward ensuring that when the inevitable transition arrives, it does so without fracture, without uncertainty, without the kind of instability that has tested the institution in the past. At the center of this emerging strategy is Catherine, not as a figure of symbolic continuity, but as an active pillar of it. According to various interpretations, her evolving role is not just about expanding influence, it is about anchoring the future itself. Because continuity in the monarchy is not simply about succession. It is about perception, trust, and the ability to maintain a sense of unwavering structure, even during times of change. And those who understand the pressures facing the institution today know that this kind of stability cannot be improvised at the last moment. It has to be built carefully, deliberately, long before it is needed. That is where Catherine's positioning becomes critical. She is not being prepared for a role. She is being embedded into a system that must function seamlessly when the spotlight inevitably shifts. Closely tied to this is William, Prince of Wales. His future is no longer a distant concept, it is an approaching reality. And according to insiders, what is happening now is deeply connected to that reality, because a transition of that magnitude does not depend on one individual. It depends on alignment, on partnership, on the ability of those at the center to operate as a unified force. The growing sense of cohesion between William and Catherine, the way their roles appear to be evolving in parallel, suggests a deliberate effort to prepare them not just as individuals, but as a functioning unit capable of carrying the weight of the crown together. And that kind of preparation does not happen by chance. It is strategic, it is calculated, and it is often done quietly, away from public scrutiny. This is where the echoes of past royal crises begin to surface, because history has shown what happens when transitions are not managed with precision. Moments of uncertainty, of misalignment, have led to fractures that took years, sometimes decades, to repair. Those lessons have not been forgotten. If anything, they have shaped the way the institution approaches moments like this now. And according to various reports, there appears to be a quiet alignment forming among key senior figures, an understanding that the future must be secured before it is tested, not publicly, not dramatically, but steadily, through decisions that may seem subtle on the surface yet carry profound implications underneath. And that is what makes this entire situation so compelling. Because if this truly is a long-term strategy, then every move we are seeing now is part of something much larger than it appears. It is not about immediate authority. It is about lasting stability. It is about ensuring that when the next chapter begins, it does so with strength already in place. But strategies like this do not unfold in the open. They rely on discretion, on control, on silence. And that silence, perhaps more than anything else, is what raises the most important question of all. And if this strategy is real, then the final piece of the puzzle lies in understanding why it had to be done in complete silence. No denial, no confirmation, just silence. And in the royal world, silence is never accidental, it's calculated, deliberate, and often more revealing than any statement. What makes this moment so striking is not what has been said, but what has been carefully withheld. Because in an institution built on tradition and controlled messaging, the absence of clarity is rarely a coincidence. It is a decision. And that decision, according to various interpretations, suggests that whatever is unfolding behind palace walls is too significant to be addressed directly. Reports indicate that the palace has chosen not to respond to the growing speculation surrounding Catherine, Princess of Wales, allowing the narrative to exist in a space that is neither confirmed nor denied. And that space, uncertain, undefined, is where the tension begins to build. Media outlets, those closest to the royal beat, have approached the situation with unusual caution. The language being used is careful, almost restrained, hinting at something major without ever fully stepping into it. Words like unprecedented and significant have surfaced repeatedly, but always without detail, without resolution. It is as if the story exists just beneath the surface, visible enough to be sensed, but never fully exposed. And that restraint is telling, because when those who are known for uncovering royal developments choose instead to circle around a story, it often means the stakes are higher than they appear. It suggests that what is being protected is not just information but impact. Inside the palace, Insiders reportedly speak in a similar tone, vague, measured, carefully constructed. Phrases are chosen with precision, offering just enough to acknowledge that something has changed, but not enough to define what that change actually is. And that ambiguity serves a purpose. It creates a buffer, a layer of protection around decisions that may still be unfolding, decisions that could carry consequences if revealed too early. Because in moments like this, timing becomes everything. Revealing too much too soon could disrupt a process that depends on control. And so, the silence holds. Not because there is nothing to say, but because saying it would change everything. For the public, this creates a different kind of experience, one defined by observation rather than confirmation. Small details become clues. Subtle shifts become signals. People begin to piece together a narrative from fragments, from patterns, from the spaces between what is visible and what is not. And in doing so, curiosity grows. Not gradually, but rapidly, fueled by the very lack of answers that should have quieted it. Because uncertainty invites interpretation. It invites speculation, and the more carefully the palace avoids clarity, the more intense that speculation becomes. This is where strategic ambiguity reveals its true power. By saying nothing, the institution maintains control. It allows developments to take shape internally without external pressure, without the immediate need to justify or explain. It protects the process while simultaneously shaping perception. Because even in silence, a message is being sent. A message that something important is happening. Something that requires patience, discretion, and above all, time. And as that message continues to ripple outward, it captures attention far beyond the palace itself, drawing global focus toward a story that has yet to fully reveal itself. And that is the paradox at the center of it all. The more the palace remains silent, the louder the story becomes. The more it withholds, the more people begin to see. Because sometimes, the absence of confirmation is the strongest signal of all. And in this case, it suggests that what is unfolding is not meant to be understood all at once. It is meant to be discovered, and piece by piece, as the reality slowly aligns with the whispers that came before it. Because sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones never officially acknowledged, and this may be one of them. If the whispers are true, then history didn't change with a coronation, it changed with a signature. One quiet moment that may have redefined what power looks like inside the royal family. It is a striking idea, almost difficult to accept at first, because the monarchy has always relied on visible milestones to mark its turning points. Crowns placed, oaths spoken, ceremonies witnessed by the world. But this was different. This was silent. And yet, according to various reports, far more consequential. Because if that signature truly carried the weight insiders suggest, then what we are witnessing now is not just a shift in role but the emergence of something entirely new. At the center of it stands Catherine, Princess of Wales, positioned in a way that does not neatly align with anything that came before her. Not fully Queen Consort, not merely a future queen, but something in between, something evolving in real time. That possibility speaks to a deeper transformation unfolding within the monarchy itself, because institutions like this do not change easily. They resist, they preserve, they hold tightly to tradition as both shield and identity. And yet, history has shown that even the most rigid systems must adapt when the pressure becomes too great. Reports suggest that behind the scenes, the monarchy has been quietly adjusting to the realities of a modern world, one that demands stability, relevance, and resilience all at once. And in that adjustment, roles that once seemed fixed are beginning to bend, to expand, to take on new meaning. Catherine's position appears to sit at the center of that evolution, not as an exception, but as a response. At the same time, the legacy of Charles III is being shaped in ways that may not be fully understood until much later. Because leadership is not only defined by public moments, it is defined by decisions made in private, by choices that alter the course of the institution without ever being formally acknowledged. And if this decision was indeed his, then it suggests a willingness to act decisively in the face of uncertainty, to secure the future even if it means stepping beyond the comfort of tradition. That contrast between the visible restraint of the monarchy and the unseen boldness of its internal decisions is what makes this moment so compelling. It reveals a tension between what is shown and what is done, between the image of stability and the reality of adaptation. For the public, this creates a gradual realization. At first, it is subtle, a feeling that something has shifted without being able to fully explain why. Then, slowly, the pieces begin to align. Appearances, interactions, tone all reinforcing the sense that Catherine's role is no longer what it once was. And as that perception grows, it begins to reshape the narrative itself. Because in the monarchy, perception is not separate from reality, it becomes it. The more people see a change, the more that change takes hold, regardless of whether it is ever officially confirmed. And this is where the story reaches its most intriguing point. Because what we may be witnessing is the early formation of a new model of royal leadership, one that blends tradition with quiet transformation, one that prepares for the future without announcing its arrival, a model that does not rely on grand declarations, but on steady, controlled evolution. And if that is true, then the true impact of this moment will not be immediate. It will unfold over time, revealing itself gradually as the structure continues to adjust around it. The real significance of that signature may only become clear years from now, when the effects are no longer subtle, but undeniable. And that is what keeps the tension alive. Because for now, everything exists in that space between certainty and speculation, between what is known and what is only beginning to be understood. And as long as that space remains, the story continues to grow, drawing attention, raising questions, and quietly reshaping the narrative of the monarchy itself. And as the world continues watching for answers, one thing is certain: the story behind that signature is far from over. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.